Hello, and welcome to Wrong Place, Wrong Crime Podcast, Episode 2. As we discussed in Episode 1, we are going to dive into the unsolved case of the Austin Yogurt Shop murders. Here in Episode 2, we will focus on the day of the crime, which is December the 6th, 1991. December the 6th, 1991 is a Friday in Austin, Texas. And at that time, Austin is an average Texas town. Not on the same level as Houston or Dallas or even San Antonio. It had around 500,000 people. And of course, the center or the hub of Austin is the University of Texas. The Keep Austin Weird era had not really hit its stride, and really the most notorious crime that had taken place in Austin up until this point, up until 1991, that it hit Austin, Texas, was the Austin Clock Tower shooting. It's carried out by Charles Whitman on August the 1st, 1966. Whitman had gone to the top of the University of Texas Clock Tower and used his high-powered rifles to shoot down upon the people. That day he killed 14, and so that was the most famous crime up until 1991 that had happened in the city of Austin. We're going to follow here in Episode 2, we're going to follow the girls' movements that day. Here, we're going to follow before they got to the yogurt shop, their time at the yogurt shop, and the events that followed when they were discovered at the yogurt shop that night. The girls had all gone to school that morning, that Friday morning. It was a chilly Friday. It's about 2 weeks before Christmas break. And now all of these four girls, Sarah, Jennifer, Eliza, and Amy, were all in the FFA. They loved it. They were all at Lanier High School, except for Amy. She was still at the middle school, but Amy was so into animals, she had gotten to go to Lanier High School to work with animals at the high school. So that was the one thing that the girls all had in common that linked all four of these girls was their love of FFA. Some were into sports and some were into other things, but their one common link was they all participated and loved FFA. Now, 17-year-old Jennifer Harbison, in her blue Chevy S10, after she had left school, she dropped her sister off back at her house in Northwest Austin. Now, Jennifer is scheduled for work at the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. that night. But at this point in the afternoon, she's gone to see her boyfriend. His name is Sammy Buchanan. She would arrive back home after meeting with Sammy at 7 p.m. to get ready to go to work. Now, Jennifer's 17-year-old friend, Eliza Thomas, had convinced her to leave her job at Albertsons, it was a grocery store, to come to work at the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt. It's at a strip center on Anderson Lane off Mopac, where she made $4.35 an hour. Now, Eliza Thomas was also scheduled to work that night. She was scheduled to start and clock in at 7 p.m. Now, that's an hour before Jennifer was supposed to clock in. She was supposed to be there from 7 p.m. to close at 11 p.m. Now, as we're going to talk about later, the yogurt shop actually closed an hour later than any other store in the strip center. The only other store that was open that late was Mr. Gaddy's, and it closed at 10 p.m. that night. It was a pizza shop. There was a party store that was also in the strip center that had closed at 9 o'clock that night. Of course, it gave out party decorations. And so the girls would be in the strip center working pretty much all by themselves. The owner of the party store was there that night, and he actually stayed after he closed the party store and he actually worked in his back office trying to get ready for the Christmas push that was coming later in the next couple of weeks. Now, 15-year-old Sarah Harbison, while at the house waiting for her sister to come back from her boyfriend's house, had invited her best friend, 13-year-old Amy Ayers, to come spend the night with her and go with her to the North Cross Mall. Amy did not go to high school, as I mentioned earlier. She was only 13 years old, so she was still attending middle school. But again, they had gotten to know one another through FFA and had become really, really good friends. They didn't get to see each other a whole lot. And so whenever they did get to spend some time together, they really enjoyed it. And so Jennifer would come and pick up the girls after meeting with her boyfriend at about 7 p.m. She came back, she picked up the girls, she went and dropped them off at the mall, and then she went to work. She would go back later, as we're going to talk about in the story. She would go back later, about 2 hours later, and pick them up at the mall at about 9 p.m. They could come back to the yogurt shop and help the other two girls that were working clean up at 11 p.m. That way they could get out faster. So they would help the girls clean and close the store later that night. They believed if they had 2 extra people working, then they would be able to close and clean the store a lot quicker. So that was kind of their arrangement for the girls getting to stay over, was that they would not only drop them off at the mall, pick them up at the mall, but they would help them close the yogurt shop that night. When Eliza arrives at the store right before 7 p.m., she takes the store office keys and opens up the office to lay her jacket, car keys, and purse and her Texas A&M backpack there in the store office. And she loved Texas A&M, and that's where Eliza was planning to hopefully go to college, was Texas A&M. She laid all the things on the filing cabinet next to the store safe in the store office. The store safe is in the back area of the store, which we'll come back to a lot later here in the story. There's a back room, and then there's the store office in the back area of the store. She locked the office door and returned the keys to the cash register. That was the store rules. Now, those keys will be found hours later undisturbed. The store office was closed all that night. It was still locked. The keys had not been moved since Eliza had put them earlier there that night. Now, Maria Thomas, Eliza's mother, we know visited her daughter at around 9:30 that night. The girls, when they got back from the mall, had actually gone down to Mr. Gaddy's at a little after 9 p.m. to get a pizza that way before it closed. Most people believe that the 2 younger girls came back and ate the pizza in the back. The pizza box would later be found in the back area. And so a lot of the witnesses did not see the 2 younger girls there at the store that night. So many believe they got the pizza and went to the back and either ate the pizza or talked. But most of the time they were in the back because most witnesses did not see them there that night. Now, at a little after 10, Eliza's father, James Thomas, and Eliza's stepmother would come into the store, and they would check on Eliza to see how her work was going that night. And then we have our key witnesses. Our 2 main witnesses came into the store, and they ordered at 10:42 p.m. Eliza brings up the last sale of the night to a couple by the name of Tim Stryker and Margaret Sheehan. Now, when Tim and Margaret leave the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt 5 minutes later at 10:47, Jennifer's cleaning the tables and preparing to close the store, and Eliza is behind the counter cleaning. Now, according to Tim and Margaret, however, there were two other male customers sitting in a booth that was nearest the register. When they had left, the two men were sitting there. They were whispering to one another. Margaret was very uncomfortable leaving the girls there with the two men. She just had a very uncomfortable feeling about these two men staying there by themselves. The two men were wearing heavy, thicker, military-like coats and jackets. Again, it was chilly that night. Really couldn't be identified because they were kind of hidden in a corner booth by the register. She just didn't feel comfortable. She actually wanted to stay, but Tim, seeing the girls were trying to close and get out of there early, he persisted that they go ahead and leave instead of sit there and eat their yogurt until the two other men left. And so they left, and we know they left at 10:47 because Margaret was so uncomfortable she actually looked down at her watch and checked her watch, and it was 10:47. Whenever they left, at some point right after they left, Jennifer locked the door from the inside, and then she flipped over the open sign, closed. They were closed for the night. Eliza, at 11:03 p.m., Eliza rings up a no sale. Now, a no sale is typically run to open up the register to get the till out and get the cash out for the night. At some point, the till was taken out and taken to the back area where it will later be found on the ground at one of the bodies with change and coins all over the ground. From here on out, we're not going to speculate in this episode as to what happened over the next 40 minutes from 11:03 until 11:48. There's about a 40-minute period. We're not going to speculate in this episode. We'll get into that in another episode as to what I believe happened during that 40 minutes. But the next thing we know for certain happened at 11:48 p.m. It was the first report of a fire at the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt shop. It's reported by Officer Troy Gay. Now, Troy Gay is an Austin Police Department officer, and he was actually on a DWI patrol that night when he spotted the smoke and fire coming from the store. And Officer Gay drove up to the front of the store and reported it. His exact quote was, "Have a fire inside of a business." So they believe at that point that there is a fire probably started by a stove left on. It is at a business, and they believe that is simply a fire that someone that has closed the store and has left something on and has caught fire. The first two men to take on the fire, their names were Rene Hector Garza and David DeVoe. They both approached the front door, and when they pulled on it, it was locked. And so they popped the door with a crowbar. And when they popped it, the smoke rose out, and they actually had to go to their hands and knees and begin to crawl because they could not walk. The smoke was so thick. They crawled into the yogurt shop. They crawled their way all the way to the back room. They actually bumped into the front register on their way back as they were crawling back. And then they made their way to the back room. And when they made their way and saw where the fire was at, they stood up. And these two were fire specialists, and so they were able to put out a majority of the fire. Now, the visibility was really bad. And so Garza was trying to move around the room to ventilate where he could see better. It was at this time that DeVoe put a hand on his shoulder and he yelled through his mask, "Is that a foot?" Garza stepped back and looked down and he saw it. DeVoe then stepped back and he saw another second body. Garza told DeVoe to stay still and don't move. He went outside and told the fire chief what they'd seen. He told him that they had found two bodies, naked and young. Garza then walked to the back of the store, which is in an alley, and the store had a back door. And when he got to the back door, he was easily able to open the back door. It was not locked. It was easily opened by Garza. When Garza opened the door, the smoke and steam, like before, rolled out of the open door. Garza took one step into the store. When he looked down, he saw another naked girl's dead body on the ground. Now, Garza would later be asked what he remembered the most from that night, and his comment was quite disturbing. His comment was, "I remember the foot. I remember the foot." After the two bodies were discovered, Officer Gay called for a homicide detective. The officer that was there that night, that was on call, was Officer John Jones. Now, John Jones was on duty that night in South Austin when he got the call. Jones happened to have a CBS affiliate, just by chance, a TV crew with him that night. And they were filming a pretty uneventful, slow night there in the Austin area. Later, this footage would be shown on 48 Hours Mystery, which some of you may have seen. 48 Hours Mystery has covered this story for the last 30 years, really since the very first night it happened. As Jones drove up 35 North, he was soon notified that there was a third dead body that had been discovered that night. As he got to the scene, he was told that there was another fourth body that had been found. Jones would later say when he arrived on the scene, he described it as full carnage. He took the pictures of the scene and he later confessed that he only looked at the pictures one time. He looked at the pictures 3 days later, and that was the only time he ever looked at the crime scene photos. He made the comment, "I didn't need pictures. That scene's burned into my memory." Now, I encourage you, if you have any comments or have any questions so far about our first 2 episodes, please leave any questions in the comments portion below. I will happily try to find any answers to any questions that y'all have. If we have enough questions, I would love to devote an episode just to answering the questions that y'all have on the case. If we have enough questions. If not, then I will take the questions individually and try to answer them as we go through each individual episode. But if I get enough questions, I will go into creating just a question and answer episode. I highly encourage you to tell a friend about the story and about the podcast. I don't have a large advertising budget. This is going to have to be a word of mouth type of podcast where you tell a friend and a friend tells another friend. Again, the episodes aren't very long. Hopefully you've enjoyed that. They're only about 10, 15, 20 minutes. Encourage a friend that you know that maybe hasn't heard the first episode or 2 or doesn't know a lot about this case, or maybe even if they do, some people that know a lot about this case are still going to learn some things as we get into the theory portion of what I believe happened there that night and who was responsible for it and why they were never brought and why charges were never brought against this person. And that's where I encourage you follow along, because as we go through this story's been going for 33 years. And I truly believe, and I think you'll see by the time we get to it, the answer's there. But you're going to see there's a reason why this story has never seen its conclusion. And I think if there's enough people watching, there's enough outpouring of people watching this show and questioning some of the things that happened in this case and how it was handled, that we might be able to get some answers. And I also want to give my sources, acknowledge some of the sources. The two sources that I've used for primarily most of the knowledge and the investigation of this case is a book by Beverly Lowry titled Who Killed These Girls, and another book called Bad Boy from Rosebud by Gary Laverne. And that's going to be about our main suspect. Now, as we get into, and we'll get into that in a further episode, again, I encourage you to like and subscribe, leave comments and questions, and tell your friends. Word of mouth is the best way for us to get this case out there and for people to learn about this case. In our next episode, episode 3, we will dive into the actual crime scene. I will have pictures, diagrams, and so make sure that you tune in to understand what all happened there in that yogurt shop that night, and the design of the yogurt shop, and some of the things that happened there, not only in the front part of the yogurt shop, but really primarily what happened in that back room in that 40 minutes that we talked about tonight. So I look forward to seeing everybody again in episode 3. And again, like and subscribe. Wrong place, wrong crime.